And we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when and where you're watching this show. This is the Healthcare Leadership Show with Marion Karr. That's me. And I am so glad that you're here. Today, we have an incredibly special opportunity to really talk to an individual who I've admired for a long time and run into at conferences. And he's such an influencer. He was a social media influencer before there was such a thing. Mr. Scott Becker. Scott, we're here to talk about your new book. Welcome to my show. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, Marion, we're so excited to be with you. Thank you so much for having me. You are always a ray of sunshine and positivity. So for me, it is a great pleasure to visit with you. And any chance I get to, I love doing so. So thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Scott. And if you're watching live, we had a lot of people accept the invitation to this show. Please let us know in the comments. We want to know you're watching, and if you have questions for Scott, please post them in the comments. We're talking today, though, specifically. Scott is an author, and for those of you who don't know who Scott is, I can't believe you wouldn't. He is an incredible healthcare attorney, but he's also ultimately one of the biggest healthcare publishers in the country. He gives us so much information through Becker's Healthcare. But Scott's got a new book that's coming out, and it is called Building Great Businesses, Create Momentum, Overcome Setbacks, and Scale with Confidence. And he gave me an opportunity to read it ahead of time. Later at the end of the show, I'll give you an opportunity to click on a QR code and pre-order the book, and I recommend it. Got people checking in already. But Scott, introduce yourself maybe to some of the audience that might not know exactly who you are, and then let's talk about this book because I'm incredibly stoked about it.
Well, no, thank you so much. So, my background, Scott Becker, I've straddled two core careers over the course of my professional life. I was started off as a lawyer and started off at one firm, but then really spent the last 30 years at a firm called McGuire Woods. I led the healthcare department there for a very long time. I served on the board of directors, great colleagues, great teams at McGuire Woods, large law firm with a large healthcare practice. When I was first getting started in law, in a long time ago now, 30 years ago, and I don't want to date myself by saying how old I was then, but I'm much older now. I started trying to build a healthcare legal practice. In building a healthcare legal practice, today you would call it building thought leadership. Back in the day, they really didn't have a term for it, but I started to write letters to potential clients to clients. I used to try and speak. I used to try and be in front of people. At some point, I started developing a small newsletter and a small conference, and that was the predecessor to what became Becker's Healthcare. So it started as sort of a thought leadership exercise to become a leader in healthcare law, to become a business healthcare lawyer representing hospitals and health systems, surgery centers, all kinds of other stuff. And then really moved into becoming truly making it into a media company over the last 20, 30 years. It was probably 5, 10 years after I started it that I started to hire people full time and start to really grow a team to build out the media company, Becker's Healthcare. Now it's become a really large media company led by our CEO, Jessica Cole, who joined me when she was in college 20 plus years ago. And she's just been a remarkable leader. And one of the things I'm most proud of, both in the law firm and in the media company, is the number of leaders that have evolved with us, that have grown with us over the long term, and have really evolved into leading the law firm, leading the media company, where I do what I do, but they really lead everything. And I think one of the principles of business is building great teams, building great leaders. And we talk about that a lot generally. And we talk about that in the book, that as a founder, you really evolve. We talk about often in three stages. First stage is you're doing everything yourself. It's sort of the chief cook, bottle washer thing that people used to talk about. The second is you're hiring people, but those people aren't necessarily better at everything than you are. And the company's still pretty limited in its growth when you're hiring a bunch of people. It's still better than doing everything yourself, But it's
Mhm.
not till that third stage where you've hired lots of people and built teams, and all the leaders of those departments are better at what they do than you were able to do yourself. And that's just the reality. That's when businesses can accelerate and grow because they're no longer you're no longer the limiting step. You're no longer the stopgap that doesn't let it go to a different stage. Now you've got lots of different people thriving and flourishing that can accelerate things without you being a brake on it, without you being a stopper on it. So we view that as the evolution of a founder in three stages. The third stage is when you've literally got people in all the leadership roles that are better than what you were able to do individually in any of those roles. And that's when businesses can really grow and thrive. And we talk about that a lot in the book, but it's been we view so much of everything about building teams in this thrive concept where the organization thrives and the leaders thrive, and there's never a perfect overlap, and you have to love that. You have to love your leaders, even though they're never going to do exactly what you want, exactly how you want them to do it, but they are thriving, doing fantastic work. The company's doing great work, and we view it as they have to thrive, you have to thrive, and the more that it's like that, thrive side by side versus top down, the better and the longer you could build things that become really significant or really impactful. So that's sort of our perspective on that. But yes, I've spent my career straddling practice of law, still involved with the law firm, a great place, and then
Mhm.
Becker's Healthcare, and then I do some other things as well. But those have been the two core focuses.
And he hit on that a lot in the book. But let me stop for a minute. Like a lot of people are watching live. Kelly Johnson's checking in from Georgia. Doug Luckett checking in from South Carolina. Um, Zlatka Rankin is checking in. Thank you. Watching from Atlanta as well. Doug Gregory, I know he's checking in from Atlanta. And one of my colleagues over at Aegis Health Services, Martin's checking in. Jason, Patrick Allen. There's a whole bunch. Please let us know in the comments. We want to know who's watching the show. And that's what this whole theme of my show is to share people in my network with my network. Scott, let's just jump in and talk about the book. You in the pre-show, I told you there were three things I loved about the book the most. And the first one was you and I read a lot. Matter of fact, at the end of your book, you wrote an appendage of like 20 books that you would recommend. And I was super excited the fact that I'd read most of them, almost the whole list. And then you pointed out that that's kind of generational to mine and your generation, our generation. But one of the things I loved about your book so much is you get right to the point. Like Jessica, and by the way, there's a chapter you mentioned Jessica. We're going to talk about her in a few minutes, but it did the foreword, which was fantastic, and really told her story as part of this, and was glad and how she connected with you, and you talk about that further when you talk about people. But first thing I loved about your book is you get right to the point, and you talk about this idea of what is it like to get started as an entrepreneur? And I think there's, for all the people in my audience, most of my audience is hospital executives, founders of companies, hospital leaders, physician practice leaders, laboratory companies, that type of thing. Because that's my world. For those of you who don't know me, I do executive search and leadership development in that world. But there's this book applies to them. But you jump right to the beginning and you said your first chapter is getting started. What made you think about writing a book that just gets right to the point and there's something we can do as soon as we start reading it?
Sure. No, so thank you so much. So yeah, no, there's pieces of this. One is I read a lot. And as I've gotten, particularly, I hate to say this, as I've gotten older, I've gotten more enthused about books that are manageable and readable and concise. So I almost view the books today. I used to be able to read books like Ken Follett's books, which were 1,000 pages. Today, it feels so daunting to pick up a book that's 1,000 pages. We're huge fans of books where somebody could read in a sitting, 3 to 4 hours, where they could read it in chapters and feel like, okay, there's something I could use from that and inspire me from that and work from that, where it's truly, user friendly for the audience, for the reader. And we try and do that. We've just become a bigger and bigger fan of being able to say what you have to say. We got a lot of professional feedback on this book. We had done a couple other books. We've written a total
Mm-hmm.
of several books. The more recent ones in the last few years have been around business topics and business stuff. And so we really got some great feedback around the last book saying you got to do a better job of weaving in your story and your thoughts with all your advice so it's more readable and more people and reader friendly. So we took that advice to heart and we stuck with the concept of concise chapters of relatively easy to read, and we hope with all these things that we talk about the same concept with our media company. Our goal is to teach and entertain, and if somebody come away with a little bit of inspiration. Like, I'm not a believer that people come to our conferences, and the conference may have anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 people, but they
Mhm.
come to the conference not so much to get didactic learning, but to come away picking up some thoughts. Can I try this? Can I try that? Can I be entertained some? Can I be inspired and motivated some? Like, when you come back from a conference, the whole goal is that you come back not beat down with a billion different ideas, but some inspiration and motivation to try a few things, to work on a couple things. And that's how we sort of view the book as well. We use sort of the telling story of business, but a lot of it is really not about me, about my businesses. It's about,
Mhm.
here's what we think generally works, here's what doesn't work. We follow so much of today's landscape where you've got people talking about being a solopreneur or doing this or doing that. And my experience is not that. My experience is that nothing works great without me putting the time and energy into building teams and great teams of people. Um, I've got a lot of different experiences, and they've worked for me. Some of the other things that people talk about so often on social media,
Mhm.
like, oh, you got to burn all the boats. You have to be all in. You have to go broke and just build your business. Not me. I grew up
Yeah.
poor. I don't need to be poor again. And I don't mean
Me
that.
too.
I don't mean that negatively, but I
Yeah.
straddled both careers for 30 years because I was too scared to not do both, and I enjoy both, quite frankly. But you hear all this different advice, and we try and have a very common sense perspective. It's worked for me. It won't work for everybody, but we do agree with you. The last book I wrote had a lot about careers and money management, just not building a business. This book is more focused on building a business, but includes still a lot of those thoughts around careers and whether you're a leader, an entrepreneur. So many people. My first real business of significance was building the legal practice, the healthcare legal practice within a large firm. And so that
Mhm.
doesn't make me a founder. That makes me what you call today an entrepreneur, where you're doing
Yep.
it within a company. And so many of the
Yep.
concepts are applicable, whether you're an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, whatever you're doing. And we just hope that people come away with it positively disposed, a little inspired, a little motivated, and they take a couple thoughts that they could use. And that's the concept.
Yeah, and I love that part about the book. Marlene has checked into and she's checking in from Atlanta, and she wanted to know what the title of the book. The title of the book is going to be "Building Great Businesses: Create Momentum, Overcome Setbacks, and Scale with Confidence." And before we get off the call, I'll post a link where you can pre-order the book. Marlene, thanks for that question, and everybody in the chat. Please connect with each other. The whole idea of the Healthcare to Leadership Show is not to be some podcast where we're just giving information. It's about building community, about building network. And the reason Scott's on my show is to talk about his book, but it was because we're part of the world of the same network that allowed that to happen. John Winling checking in from down in Texas, from Dallas. I see Kristen McDermott Woodrum's checking in, one of our favorite people over at your firm. Toyetta Dixon checking in from Chicago, a whole bunch of other people. Scott, one of the things you talked about from that entrepreneurial part that I really love. And this is the quote that this is the, I guess, second part that I loved about this book. You were talking about you chose to be a rainmaker in your practice when you started rather than working off of other attorneys' work. And you were young in your career at that time, and how there were naysayers typically that often come into our world that say, no, you can't do that, or you shouldn't be doing that, or they have some negative thought. And this quote, I love this, and I'd love for you to talk about it a minute. I wrote this down. If someone isn't bristling at what you're doing, you may not be doing the right thing anyway. And I love that quote, and how it ties
Sure.
to your book is so
So
good. Talk about
so
that.
yeah, there's so many different pieces there that I'll try and touch on real quickly. But
Okay.
but Kristen Woodrum and I have a deal. Both of us are supposed to be working right now. So
Yep.
the deal that the two of us have is that it's anonymous, that Kristen McDermott Woodrum's
Oh,
on, and that
sorry.
I'm on. So nobody knows that we're on. No, I'm just joking. Is fantastic. Yeah. So when I was a young lawyer at a huge firm, I started my first job at a huge firm.
Mhm.
And the thing that you learned, and this goes back 30 years ago, and law firms have changed a lot over the years and so forth. But back in the day, if you didn't have your own client base, you were treated just like a dog. And so there were
Mhm.
lawyers that were 20 years older than me that were brilliant lawyers. And if they didn't control or have their own clients, have their own business, it could be Friday afternoon, and some other partner that controlled business would tell them, you have to get on a plane and go here today. You have to go there. You got to go see John Wendling in Dallas. You got to go see, whoever it is. And,
Yep.
and it was just it was a brutal way to live because you just had no control of your life. So I
Yep.
was a big believer when I got serious about practicing law in my late 20s that if I was going to do it, I had to build a practice. Now, I didn't want to ever treat anybody like those people were treated, but I
Mhm.
wanted to make sure I wasn't that vulnerable. And so I was very intent on building a client base and building a practice base. I did so in the healthcare area, specifically originally around surgery centers, then hospitals and health systems and the healthcare companies and more. But it really started in that area. And there's this concept about, there's two other concepts you mentioned there, the naysayers and bristling. And I'll
Mhm.
talk about those for a second. One is when you're a young person trying to develop a legal practice, there was a whole setup thing, particularly more so then than there is today, that very much sort of looked down upon that like,
Mhm.
you're supposed to be just taking care of clients. Who do you think you are trying to develop a client base? And but the problem is if you don't fight through that, you end up 10 years later without a client base, and now you're a more mature, sophisticated lawyer, but you have no control of your life. So you have to have almost two jobs for a period of time because you're both building a practice and you're working on clients. So there's that problem, there's that concept and challenge. But if you don't do it, and it takes years, whenever you're starting anything, my experience has always been it almost always takes a couple years once you start
Mhm.
something to, one, start to see any results from it, but two, to start to really learn what you're doing. And I've seen one of the most successful lawyers at our firm is now on the executive committee of the firm. A woman named Amber Walls just had a fantastic career. She's a leader of the firm, and she went through a period, a learning process of going from trying to build a practice to really building the practice to being the go-to person for so many people throughout the country and so many big companies throughout the country in healthcare. But it was like I saw it in myself, but it was fascinating to watch in Amber as she matured and grew into this
Mhm.
true complete leader. And I think with all of us, you have to get started. There's going to be naysayers, and it's going to take a
Yep.
while to fight through that. The second concept is when I really started to build a practice and started to have some success, I would have people outside the firm, competitors with us, or other people that would start to criticize some of the things that I was doing. And I remember one of my partners at the time saying to me, that's a sign that you're making progress. If people are starting to look at you and say, like taking shots at you, like a competitor would say, Scott's really good, but only in this little area. And that was that way of like submarining the client trying to hire us for something else. And I
Yes.
thought it was a fascinating life experience and learning experience. So you can't listen to the naysayers because you're always going to have some. And there's a great concept that you're not really in the ring until you get punched. And it just is, it's part of the game. Like I know that you're making progress when a competitor starts to notice you or says, well, if they're doing that, we're going to do this, whatever it might be. One of our competitive firms, years after we built a healthcare private equity event, built their own healthcare private equity event, and we don't view that as a negative. We view that as, obviously something's going right that they feel like they got to compete with us in that area or this area. So yeah, no, we love that, and obviously the energy that we had at that time. I'm much older now. I wish I could still recreate that passion and energy every single
Yeah.
day, and it's challenging some days. But
Yeah.
it was. No, I find those lessons to be fascinating. Um, and so many people that are on with us today are people
Yep.
that you and I have come across that have that kind of grit and energy and that determination. Kristen, who we mentioned earlier, is one of them, and we love that in people, that grit, that determination, sort of living with the naysayers, pushing past them. I can't even tell, when we really started with Becker's Healthcare, I went to somebody that became a long-term mentor to me, and he said basically, ridiculous idea, the space is too crowded, don't do it. And you sort of have to hear the naysayer and then make a
Yep.
decision. And we decided to double down on Becker's Healthcare, and obviously the best decision, that one of the best decisions we ever made professionally. But you're going to have naysayers in everything that you do, and you have to learn to zone them out a lot.
And yeah, I love that. And when I first got in the recruiting business 34 years ago, I have this obviously, I have this very thick North Carolina accent. I'm from North Carolina. I live in the beautiful Georgia mountains in the Appalachian region. So, and I sound like I'm from here. A naysayer told me I'd fail miserably in the executive recruiting world because of my accent. And well, we know where we are now. Here we are,
Yeah, no,
2026. But same thing. Yeah, it's exciting. Talk about that.
no, it's fantastic. I will do this. I'll make one pitch for the book very quickly, and I don't know
Yeah, I
how many
want to do
people are
that.
on, so I hope there's not
Yep.
that many people on.
Yep.
But the whole game with these books, and I'm getting an education in books, is to get people to pre-order the book. And
Yep.
so we want people to pre-order the book on Amazon, the hardcover edition.
Yep.
And what I'm going to give people my text number. Okay.
Okay.
My text number is 773-766-5322. And I'll do that again. 773-766-5322. If you go ahead and pre-order the book, you send me a copy that you've ordered it to my text, we will send you a $25 gift certificate to pay for the book. So that is my free offer to everybody on the phone today, or everybody on the show today. We'd love you to do it. But pre-order it. Send me your pre-order on Amazon, the hardcover edition. It'll arrive June 23rd. But the whole game with this thing, and I'm getting an education in the book business, is you have
Yep.
to get pre-orders. So I am thrilled, literally thrilled. Send me a text, 773-766-5322. We'll send you, within a day or so of you sending me the text, the $25 gift certificate to reimburse you for the book. So God bless you for that. Let's go back to the discussion, Marion. But that's the pitch for the day.
I want to get back to that. But up on the screen right now is a QR code. It'll take you straight to the book. If you shoot that as well. Yeah. Thank you. And we want you to grow. The other thing, chapter 11, you really get into the value of teams. And you've built such an amazing team. And I think this is where the book really has even an amazing connection to all the people on this call, where we lead teams, we're part of teams, et cetera. And you really go deep on this idea of around why having the right people around you. And I know a lot of people have written about that, but that chapter really stood out. Could you talk about that part of the book briefly and share why that's so important to your success, both in the attorney world and your legal world, but also with Becker's?
Yeah, no, we think that it's everything. We think that at the end of the day, you look at all these iconoclastic entrepreneurs, the truth of all these people, whether it's Mark Cuban, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, I mean, some of them have crazy energy, of course, but nobody does it alone. And obviously, we're in the D- category compared to those folks, but nobody does it alone. They all do it with teams. And I look at Bill Gates and I look at Steve Jobs. And what we say about leadership is leaders have to be judged in three different ways. One, they got to be judged based on the results. There's no way around that. You have to produce results if you're a leader. Second, they have to be judged on how many other leaders they develop. So when I look at myself as proud, in developing other leaders really is a misnomer. It's really identifying other leaders and doubling down on those leaders often before they realize they could be as great as they are. Because you're never really developing other people. They're developing themselves, but you at least recognizing that they have the talent, the drive, the motivation. So the second thing you judge leaders on is how well do they develop other leaders. The third thing, and I'll take this back to the Steve Jobs and Bill Gates thing. You judge organizations on how well do they thrive when that leader has left the CEO seat. Steve Jobs, obviously, due to a very sad death, pancreatic cancer. Bill Gates due to retirement. But what you really look at, and you look at those two folks, and you say they're magnificent, not only for their creativity, their drive, the results they delivered, but because those organizations are doing better now that they're gone than they did when they were there. And when you've really built a deep team, a great culture, a great company, like Microsoft did, like Apple did, you've got this situation now. Uh, Tim Cook runs Apple. It's continued to thrive. It's a $4 trillion market cap company. Uh,
Mhm.
Microsoft, Satya Nadella has done amazingly well there. I mean, they've just knocked it out of the park. And the real tribute to those leaders is the results they had there, the additional leaders they developed, and that the companies have thrived when they're gone. I just think in business, everything's about building teams. We have a concept in the book that we name after one of our core associates from 100 years ago who left me early on in my career.
Mhm.
And the concept is that like you can't you need multiple people stacked around core things to build great things. And so the learning was you can't be reliant on one customer, you can't rely on one person. There's this constant evolution, and the goal is to be conjunctive, not and or. It's not like we got rid of that one person, we brought another great person. It's we kept that great person, brought another great person. We kept that great client and brought in another great client. It's a constant conjunction game, not pitting people against each other, but growing people. And we view it in teams that way too. The worst you could have is highly talented, highly motivated people that don't have a role for their leadership because they'll find another place to go. They'll disenfranchise themselves if you don't find a spot for them and so forth to lead and to grow. And so it's a constant effort. But we think everything is about building teams, taking care of customers, taking care of making sure you're really serving a product market fit. We got a handful of core ideas that aren't new ideas. We just try and we've had our own perspective and lens on them, and sometimes we hope that they resonate with people.
We've got in the chat, we've got Doug has ordered the book. I know Tammy's going to be ordering the book, and a lot of chat going back and forth and about that. And we're supporting you. And the reason we're supporting you, Scott, is not only because it's going to be a great book, and I loved reading it, but the other reason is as gratitude for Becker's Hospital Review, Becker's Healthcare. It is our go-to on information. I read it every morning and have for years. You know, it started out as an email, et cetera. And so thank you. And thank you to your whole team for that. We only have a few more minutes, and I know there's going to be some questions, and we're probably not going to get to Q&A. But so, Scott, you're going to have to come back on my show. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, I'm going to lock you in. We'll do a Q&A when the book comes out to keep pushing it. But one of the other things you talked about that resonated with me was the third thing that really resonated with me was this idea of, and I love this quote, whatever your own motivation is, in other words, what are you going after? That motivation better be deep. And it hit me when I was reading that because I've had a lot of different entrepreneurial ideas. Inflow Executives is mine and my wife's new iteration we started 2 years ago. That's a culmination of 34 years of me doing a whole bunch of different things, and like, how can we put it into one? And we're all in, we're fully deep into it. Talk about why that is, even as healthcare leaders, building their skills, being good at what they do, they need to really lock in on that. I
Well,
think that's a
I think
lesson
that
that everybody needs to learn.
yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think all of us, anybody who's with us, whether you're 20 or 60 or 70 or 80, almost all of us have had various successes in our careers and businesses, and various challenges and failures in our careers and businesses. And in what I have found throughout my career is periodically you really get taken by something that you're working on, that you really get excited about it, and that passion and drive can flow through to a lot of things when that passion drive is really going. And when it's really going, it's very easy because you could categorize life and simplify life. Life is about that and family and nothing else. There was a long period of time where there wasn't golf, there wasn't guys' nights out, there wasn't any of those things. It was family and business, and that's it. But I was really compelled by the two things, by the children and the business. And when you have that, you have to really double down on and triple down on it. I think the harder time for so many of us is when we're not as passionate and driven about something specifically at a different time. And that is going to happen too throughout professional careers. is recultivating that passion and taking care of oneself, your physical, your mental health, and trying to refine that passion and testing and challenging and so forth. And I think for me, that's the harder part is when you go through those periods of time where that passion and clarity is not as clear. And I think this is one of the great challenges in professional life over a long period of time. Like the Warren Buffett example, where he did this till he's 99 with a tremendous temperament, tremendous investor, tremendous management is an amazing thing to me. Most of us are more manic than that, where we're unbelievably driven for 10 years at this, and then we're taking a break or doing something different. I think it's a constant evolution. But what I've found in myself is when I'm really locked in on something, I can be really, really effective. When I really build teams, I can be really, really effective. When I try and do it without that, or I try and do it with shortcuts, it can't go very far. So I do think the passion, the drive, the teams, really taking care of markets, really taking care of customers, really important. And when you're too distracted or doing too many things and not as focused, and you don't bring that drive, that overwhelming drive and commitment to it, it's really hard to do. So
I tell leaders all the time that go ahead.
No, I wish I could be that focused in my golf game and that locked in and be successful at that. I see all these guys that become 5-7 handicaps, and I just can't seem to do it because I can't get myself back there to keep on working on it in a smart, intelligent way. And I might lack the athleticism too, but it's a combination of things. But I do find, the passion to build teams, the passion to drive and really take care of customers, and really try and do what you're doing really well. It takes a lot of energy. I don't think there's a way around that. At least there's not for me. I mean, I see people that are so smart that they can just deploy people. I've never been able to do that. To me, it's really building and understanding, and I have to be deeply in something to really understand it, to really be effective. I think it's a fascinating thing.
It's exciting, and I told you we were going to run out of time, and so we're up against the time. But one thing I always say to people is, leaders, when they're looking to grow their team, is help people understand what they do better than most and focus on that and make impact. And I think your book really talks about that same thing, is you were really good at being an attorney, but you became really good at scaling your business through information, through building teams. There's so much impact in the book. Scott, thank you for being on the show. I'm going to put the QR code back up. If you're watching the show live or watching the replay, click that, hit that QR code, and grab a pre-order of the book. Thank you all for being on the show and in the comments live. And for those of you who watch the replay, also comment, let us know why that you're here. This is the Healthcare Leadership Show with me, Marion Spears Karr. Next week's episode, we're going to be talking with CJ McCall with Aegis Health Services about the work they're doing, the incredible work they're doing with PGX and helping clinicians across the country improve how they care for patients with multiple drug therapies. So catch us at 12:30 next week. Scott, any last comments? Thank you so much for being on the show, Scott. I truly am honored to have you here.
Marion, you are always a ray of sunshine. One of these people that just radiates positivity and encouragement, and people like that are so hard to find and so important in one's life. So we appreciate you so much. I'll make one more pitch. Please pre-order the book. If you pre-order the book, I'll be happy to reimburse you for it. It's $22 on Amazon, 773-766-5322. Send me a picture you bought the book, or just buy the book, but I'm happy to send you a gift card for it. Love you all. Thank you so much for joining Marion Spears Karr show. Marion, thank you so much for having me. It's always just great to visit with you.
Great to see you. I can't wait to see you in Chicago in a few months. Everyone, connect with me. Let me know what you thought of the show. Post in the comments, send us a DM, connect and follow Scott. And we'll talk to you soon. See you next week at 12:30. Have a great day. And we'll be off the air now.